it just tells you that the G20 is the right level to address it, because you need to coordinate a lot of work streams, action streams, which also require political commitment. And that's exactly what the FSB and CPMI are putting together. And they will publish an action plan early July, where you will have all these actions listed, and hopefully G20 finance ministers will commit to advancing them.
The Financial Stability Board is going to give a report to the G20 in early July. The report is going to include a recommendation on crypto asset stablecoins. The G20 will have to come to an agreement on how all nations will move forward with crypto assets.
Of course. So in the report, in the chapter, you mentioned that there's a projected 20% decline in global remittances this year, thanks to the situation with the pandemic. And I was wondering what such a dramatic decline in remittances would mean for the global payment sector and for the global payment system. And my second question is there any dialogue going on at the moment between regulators or even at the BIS or at an industry level about how the question of very opaque remittances can be tackled, but also the question of the extremely high cost of remittances? But the latter part of that question, I think you slightly touched on that earlier with the cost of payments in developing countries. But I was just wondering specifically if there'd been any dialogue about remittances.
COVID is exposing the vulnerabilities in the system. Crypto assets are outside of the system and can be utilized. It's no secret that the central banks want to move forward with CBDC and technological future, but they need to be in control.
Yes, thank you, Sophia. I think that's, so we got your question this time. So the first part of your question is the impact on the global economy that comes from the fall in remittances. And then the follow-up was the broader question on how to tackle the various impediments on remittances, especially of migrant workers, presumably, and the impact on the global economy there. I think the fall in remittances this year, that is in part due to the economic downturn and also the various restrictions on travel and other decline in mobility that have really combined to create the perfect storm. So it's a reflection of the downturn in global economic activity, I would say.
What better way to stimulate remittances by lowering the price significantly and having it settle in real time?
On remittances more generally, you may know that the G20 has a special initiative this year. It's under the Saudi presidency of the G20, which has tasked the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, to coordinate a study on how to improve and how to make more efficient and cost-effective cross-border payments, especially remittances.
The FSB is resolved to quicken the pace of developing the necessary regulatory and supervisory responses to the new instruments. It will issue a draft report on regulatory issues and possible responses for public consultation. Cross-border payments, recognizing the importance of efficient and inclusive payment services for global growth. The Saudi G20 presidency has requested the FSB to coordinate the development of a roadmap for improving cross-border payments. The FSB will deliver this roadmap to the G20.
And we've just, and the BIS is part of that study through the CPMI. And with the member central banks. And we've just completed the first part of that study, which was delivered to the G20 in April. We're now into the so-called second phase of that study, and we are making very good progress on that. I think what we found is that the problem with remittances and cross-border payments more generally isn't down to any one problem, but it's a combination. Some of it is technical, some of it is the the absence of common standards, and something as trivial sounding as different office, different business hours across jurisdictions can also be an issue. Now, I think the best person to answer this question is actually Benoît, who was the chair of the CPMI and who is deeply familiar with these issues. So, Benoît, why don't I turn it over to you for the deeper.
He mentioned there is a lack of common standard. Two key takeaways: common standards, ISO 222. Is Pay ID the response to the ISO delays? The business hours of crypto run 24/7.
Questions?
Well, no, I think you've said it all, Hyun. It's a very important question. I think it's fair to say and to acknowledge that the making remittances cheaper has been a major failure of the global community. I think many of us are old enough to remember a number of G7 initiatives on remittances, which didn't bring much, to be honest. And so what the G7 and the G20 didn't achieve by themselves, technology is now achieving it, because it puts so much pressure on incumbent technologies and incumbent value chains that something has to change. If you take Libra, for instance, I think the proponents, the sponsors of Libra themselves have said that the main business case is with cross-border payments.
Libra stirred up controversy when it came on the scene. Ripple is working with governments, it's working with the institutions, it's working with regulators. It's the company they can trust and rely on.
Because that's where the cost advantage and the speed advantage is the easiest to reap. And so it became obvious last year to the international community that whichever answer was being provided by Libra and by other stablecoins, that could be discussed in itself, but it was in any case it was an answer to a relevant question, which was about bringing down the cost of remittances, which is now the CPMI and the FSB are looking into.
XRP is a trustless asset. It's a trustless asset that has no government control. It is the level playing field. While Libra is a basket of currency, a basket of government control.
Now, as Hyun said, there is only so much that technology can do. A lot has to do with the structure of domestic financial systems, and a lot has to do with legal and I would say even political obstacles to global financial integration.
The banks are ready, the financial institutions are ready, everybody is ready. We are waiting on government. Government has to make these decisions. That is why the G20 is so important. All governments need to agree, and time is of the essence. Which relates to in particular to legal requirements. So just to give an example, the strengthening of AML/CFT requirements has had a consequence. Had the global correspondent banking network collapse. It's getting very hard to find a correspondent bank in many small developing economies now, and of course that has an impact on cross-border payments. This is why we have seen Ripple work with the exotic corridors. They're working with the small governments first. They're working from the bottom up. So it just tells you that the G20 is the right level to address it, because you need to coordinate a lot of work streams, action streams, which also require political commitment, and that's exactly what the FSB and CPMI are putting together. And they will publish an action plan early July, where you will have all these actions listed, and hopefully G20 finance ministers will commit to advancing them. And hopefully the G20 will commit to advancing them. This next G20 meeting is very important.
Great, thank you.
The next question comes from Siddharth Chandani from the Asian Banker. Please go ahead.